Welcome back to F1 Brake Check, my hearty speed freaks. This is our second podcast of the new year, and we have treats for you. On today's episode, we'll have a new biography, and we'll discuss the latest news and rumors. So grab a drink and strap in. F1 Brake Check is charging into turn one at full throttle.
Welcome. You are listening to F1 Brake Check, the epic podcast for all things Formula One, where we discuss technology, history, news, and perspective. With your hosts, Scott Vick and Corey Broom.
We're back with F1 Brake Check. My name is Scott Vick. I am one of your intrepid hosts. With me, as always, is my brother in arms, my ride or die, my pundit for life, Mr. Corey Broom. Corey, how are you doing this week, sir?
Good. Yeah, we're talking a little bit offline. It's been one of those weeks already. So we're recording on Tuesday, and it feels like Friday. How about you?
Yes, absolutely. No. But yeah, so no, for those of you not in the U.S., yesterday was a bank holiday. So I actually had the day off, and so today was actually my first work day of the week, and I'm right there with you that just this one day has been just absolutely brutal. So
yeah. It's like punishment for having the time off.
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. So just be glad to get this week over with. I always dislike these short weeks anyway, because they always seem like they're longer anyway.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take and jump into our first biography of the new year. When you think of Formula One champions, images of brash confidence, unshakable arrogance, and defiant self-belief come to mind. But then there's Philip Toll Hill Jr., a man who defied expectations not with bravado, but with an introspective calm. A champion who raced not for the thrill of fame, but because he simply couldn't resist the call of speed. Born on April 20th, 1927 in Miami, Florida, Hill's story is one of triumph against the odds, a tale of a man from humble beginnings who etched his name in the annals of motorsport history. A reluctant hero, he became the first, and so far the only, American-born Formula One world champion. Phil Hill wasn't born into wealth or a family of racers, but what he did have was an insatiable curiosity for machinery. As a young boy, Hill moved to Santa Monica, California, where the rumble of hot rods and the hum of vintage cars became a backdrop to his life. His fascination with engines wasn't just a hobby, it was an obsession. By his teenage years, Hill had earned 3, 2, 1. By his teenage years, Hill had earned a reputation as a gifted mechanic, meticulously taking apart and reassembling anything with wheels and an engine. Yet his passion wasn't limited to the garage. He began racing in the expanding Southern California sports car scene, where he quickly made a name for himself as a fearless driver who was obsessively meticulous with his preparations. In 1949, Hill made the pilgrimage to Europe, determined to race with the best. It was there in the hallowed grounds of motorsport that his career truly began. Phil Hill's journey to Formula One was as much about timing as it was about talent. By 1955, he had impressed the right people with his performances in sports car racing, and none other than Enzo Ferrari himself took notice. Hill became a factory driver for Scuderia Ferrari, first competing in endurance events like the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The young American's smooth, precise driving style paired perfectly with Ferrari's finely tuned machines. Hill thrived in endurance races, winning Le Mans 3 times in 1958, 1961, and 1962. But his true calling awaited him in the high-stakes world of Formula One. Hill made his F1 debut at the 1958 French Grand Prix in Reims, driving for Ferrari. While his start was steady rather than spectacular, his potential was evident. By the end of the season, he scored his first podium with a second-place finish in Monza. The groundwork was laid for what would become a remarkable career. Hill's defining year came in 1961, a season shrouded in both glory and tragedy. Driving the Ferrari 156 Sharknose, Hill showcased his brilliance, securing 2 race wins, 5 podiums, and 1 pole position. His victories at Spa-Francorchamps and Monza were masterclasses in precision and composure. The 1961 season culminated in a dramatic showdown at the Italian Grand Prix. Hill and his Ferrari teammate Wolfgang von Trips were locked in a fierce battle for the Drivers' Championship, but the race was marred by tragedy. Von Trips collided with Jim Clark's Lotus a crash that claimed the lives of Von Trips and 15 spectators. Hill went on to win the race, clinching the championship under a cloud of immense grief. With 29 starts, 3 wins, 16 podiums, and 6 pole positions in his Formula One career, Hill's statistics tell only a small part of his story. His calm demeanor and technical approach to racing stood in stark contrast to the fiery personalities around him. Hill's success came at a time when Formula One was as much a test of survival as it was a sport. The cars were fast but fragile, the circuits were unforgiving, and safety was a distant afterthought. Yet Hill approached racing with a mix of pragmatism and passion. He often worked alongside his engineers, fine-tuning the car to perfection. His understanding of the machines he drove set him apart, allowing him to push boundaries without unnecessary risks. But Hill wasn't just a driver and mechanic. He was a man of many interests. Away from the track, he indulged in his love of classical music and photography, pursuits that reflected his thoughtful and introspective nature. Hill also became a respected journalist, writing for the magazine Road and Track, chronicling the history of motorsports, and he became a collector of vintage cars, preserving the machines he loved so dearly. The years following Hill's championship was marred by Ferrari's internal struggle and declining performance. In 1963, he had parted ways with the Scuderia, joining the fledgling ATS team, a venture started by former Ferrari engineers in what became known as the Great Walkout. Unfortunately, the cars were uncompetitive and Hill struggled to make an impact. His final F1 race came at the 1964 Italian Grand Prix, now driving for the Cooper Formula One team. After leaving F1, Hill shifted his focus back to sports car racing, where he remained a revered figure, competing in and winning endurance events throughout the remainder of the 1960s. Phil Hill passed away on August 28, 2008, at the age of 81. He was survived by his wife, Alma, and his 3 children, Derek, Vanessa, and Jennifer. He was not the stereotypical racing champion. He lacked the flamboyance of a James Hunt or the ruthless determination of a Michael Schumacher or Niki Lauda. Instead, Hill's greatness lay in his quiet resolve, his technical mastery, and his ability to excel in one of the most dangerous eras of motorsport. And so, Phil Hill remains a paradox in the world of Formula One, a man who didn't crave the spotlight, but earned it nonetheless. The reluctant champion, the gentleman racer, the legend.
So what made you pick him?
Well, because of some of the other biographies we had done, I just thought it was kind of appropriate, especially now that Sargent is not in Formula One anymore and we no longer have an American in F1. I thought it would be just kind of appropriate to go back and to make the first biography of this year about the first, and as I mentioned in the biography, the only American-born champion in Formula One. The only other American champion was, of course, the great Mario Andretti, but Mario was not born in America. He was actually born in Italy and immigrated to the United States when he was a very small boy, and he later became a American citizen as he was progressing in his racing career. So by the time he joined IndyCar and Formula One, he was already an American citizen, but he wasn't American born. So,
Right.
like I said, Phil Hill stands out as, being the only true American born Formula One champion. And Phil has, just really has a fascinating story in the fact that, like I said, in the biography, he wasn't known as, he wasn't, he didn't have this super huge ego. He was always a very humble man and everything. I never had the pleasure of getting to meet him, but I've known a few other drivers who they had gotten to know Phil, and every one of them, to the man, always talked about, just how he really wasn't crazy about talking about himself. He really, you really had to, pry stuff out of him and everything. But they said that he was just a fascinating man because he could not only talk about, all things mechanical, but he had such a love for other things, like I mentioned in the biography about photography and his love of classical music, particularly I believe it was Mozart that he really loved, and he could talk hour upon hour endlessly about all these other subjects outside of motorsports that made him such a fascinating man. But his knowledge of them, but when you really pressed him upon it, from what I understand is, his understanding of mechanics and the way that, the engine and the car and everything work together, and his understanding of the physics and the dynamics behind it. He was just a one of a kind, that really, made him stand out in the sport. And then also the other thing about his, being, his Formula One World Championship that came, to him, it was only because of the tragedy that happened to Wolfgang von Trips during, the last race of the season. Is basically, so it's like he was, he won the championship. He was in a full on, dogfight with his teammate for the championship, but it was just because it was done, he was won under, such a cloud of tragedy, especially, it's bad enough when a driver is killed, but it's really, and the sport's marred with, dozens, if not hundreds of incidents, if, spectators being killed as well. And that's what makes it even worse, was not just the fact that Von Trips was killed, but that, he took out 15 spectators with him.
No kidding. Right.
So, but yeah, so that's the reason why I picked Phil, is just because I always thought that he was a very fascinating man. And, and he stands out, like I said, again, only American born Formula One world champion, to date. It makes him, literally, on top of the, pinnacle of the Formula One world.
Right.
All right, so let's take a jump into our news section. So, since the last time we talked to you, we didn't get a chance to talk about this last week, but since the end of the season, we talked about, Perez getting sacked, and that Checo is no longer a Red Bull driver. But the last time we talked about Checo getting, the boot, Red Bull had not named his successor, and we had talked about how, there was rumors that Liam Lawson was going to be his successor, but we talked about how we thought that it was such a huge, mistake, and that Yuki really deserved, the second slot at Red Bull. And then shortly afterwards, we get the news that Lawson is indeed going to be Max Verstappen's teammate for next year, and that Yuki will still be relegated to the Racing Bull stable. So, first of all, your thoughts, Corey, on Liam Lawson being named, and that Yuki Tsunoda is still a Racing Bull driver, but he did not get the call up like a lot of people thought that he deserved.
I think it's crazy. I think it's a pretty large misstep in Red Bull, which, is not very often that they make this big of a misstep. To date, Lawson has 11 races under his belt.
Mm-hmm.
Yuki has 4 seasons. He's much more seasoned. He's much more prone to be able to be in that Red Bull seat. And they would. I think it was Horner, or maybe it was Helmut Marko, that was saying, "Hey, we looked at their post race inside of a Red Bull, and we just liked the way that Lawson looked." You can't determine everything over one drive. I mean, look at Ricardo. You can't look at just one single race or one single a trial timing. It just doesn't do him justice at all. Because again, like what we've talked about is the amount of stress that's going to be put on that driver, not just on track, but I'm talking more off track. So Yuki can handle that. I mean, he pushes back like nobody I've ever seen. Well, besides maybe Max. I mean, he pushes back pretty hard, so he's not intimidated. I don't see that, the intimidation factor really playing into Lawson. But what I do see potentially there is all the critiques, all the critics coming after him saying, well, why didn't you do this? Or why did you place that? I can really see that playing into his head and building on that, kind of like what we saw with Checo. I mean, we all know he's a good driver. He was at one point. And yet I think that a lot of the media probably got really into his head. What are your thoughts?
Well, the one thing I'm going to disagree with you there is that I really do think, though, that Max Verstappen as a teammate is going to be hugely detrimental to Liam Lawson's psyche. I really do think that he is going to intimidate the crap out of Lawson,
Ah,
and that Lawson is going to crumble just like, and we'll talk about here in just a minute. We'll talk about some of the other notable drivers who have driven alongside of Max. Um, but yeah, I think that, I think Lawson is going to be, is going to crumble. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm going to go out on a limb and make a bold prediction that Lawson may start the season at Red Bull, but he will not finish the season at Red Bull. I mean, I could be
interesting.
totally wrong, but I really don't think so. I think it's going to be another incident of after a few races, I don't, Checo being the outlier, because he was so up and down, I think was the only reason why he was given as much leash as he was, especially there towards the end when he was really not doing well. I don't think Liam's going to have that pleasure, because you're right. He's only got, I think I don't have the stat in front of me, but yeah, he's only has, a handful of, Formula One starts,
Hmm.
and never at the sharp end of the grid.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Now the thing is though, is that, they didn't look at just the test. They may have
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that was the reason why, but I guarantee you they were also looking at other things. They were looking at his time in Formula 3, and Formula 2. They were looking at his time at Racing Bull. They're looking at his time, that he spent, in the simulator as the, reserve driver. They were looking at a lot of these other things, but I still don't think that, I hate to use the term, but he's not a once in a generational talent,
Yeah. Right.
and he hasn't paid his dues. If he had done either of the either of those two things, then yes, I think that, maybe Red Bull should have given him the look. But the fact of the matter is he's a good driver, but he's not a great driver. He's
Yeah.
not a once in a generational talent. I think that we have, I think that we have two incoming rookies who I think we might be able to consider, we'll see in the long run which one ends up being that. But I think that, Antonelli and Bierman both have that potential to be, because they are, even showing it as teammates, that they both have just a tremendous amount of talent that I just don't see in Lawson. I see him as being a really good driver, but I don't see him as being that once in a generational talent that deserves that quick promotion to, a top tier team. And he also hasn't paid his dues at Racing Bulls, like Yuki has,
Hmm.
So I think it's just, I really do think that it was a huge mistake on Red Bull's part in
Totally.
promoting him over Yuki. And I think that they're going to end up, regretting that in the long
Yeah.
run.
I
So let's
have
take
no doubt about it. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I was going to say, let's take, but I mean, when you take, let's talk about, and we'll look at some of the other drivers that, that Red Bull has promoted up to that seat who have worked, and I'm going to, this particular conversation, we're going to keep focused on just on the ones who have been teammates to Max Verstappen since he got his promotion from what at the time was Toro Rosso, which later became AlphaTauri, which later became Racing Bulls. But when he got his promotion, he got that promotion fairly quickly because he was recognized as, this kid is a once in a generational talent, which he's proven out, now being a four-time world champion. But some of the other teammates that he's had, Danny Kvyat flamed out fairly quickly.
Hmm.
Pierre Gasly flamed out very quickly. Uh, Alex Albon flamed out very quickly. And then you had Sergio Perez, who had paid a lot of his dues
Yeah.
racing for, other teams, like Racing Point, which at the time I think was called Force India,
Yeah.
and so it was like he came up and got that seat, and he proved that once he was Max's, you know,
Yeah.
teammate for a long time, he showed until he lost the thread, he
Yeah.
showed that he had the ability to go toe, when the car was right, he had the ability to go toe to toe with Max Verstappen.
Absolutely.
But these other drivers, they never really showed. They were all very highly rated, but they hadn't paid those dues. And then they got the call up to the big boy team, and almost every single one of them flamed out fairly quickly because they couldn't even remotely match what Max could do. The only other driver that's ever, besides Checo, that was ever able to match Verstappen in the same machinery was Daniel Ricciardo back
Yeah,
when he was still driving for Red Bull.
right.
So it's like, so you've had so Max has had, five different teammates at Red Bull, and only two of them were able to match him, and only one was actually able to leave Red Bull of his own accord,
Yeah.
still at the point with it being Ricardo,
Yep.
still at the point of being able to match Verstappen.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, this all goes back to you have to have somebody that is very seasoned in that seat. Having 11 races under your belt is not very seasoned. And
Correct.
I can understand, you're looking at different timings, but even if you're taking in consideration F2, F3, those are completely different cars, not even on the same stage as F1. So yeah, you
No,
can look at the timings, but that doesn't tell the story. You have to have the experience there. And again, we both are in agreement here that I just don't get it, man. I do not understand how they made, at least in my opinion, I think yours as well. This is a huge misstep on their part.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think this was a huge misstep, and like I said, I'm making the prediction now that Liam may start the season at Red Bull, but he will not finish the season at Red Bull.
Yeah. Yep. I'll take you on that one.
Okay. All right. So, but that also leads us into the other side of the coin is, what do you do? What does Yuki do now? Is Yuki going to now think that, okay, well, maybe if they don't think enough of me, maybe I need to start exploring other avenues. And if something else comes along, I've shown my loyalty to, the Red Bull organization. Maybe now he takes and he starts looking far afield. Maybe he takes and he starts thinking, well, maybe I've done everything that I needed to do and I still got screwed. Maybe it's time for me to leave the fold and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So maybe possibly, if something were to happen at one of the other, teams, and they came calling for Yuki, would Yuki take that next step? And in my personal opinion, I don't know enough about Yuki's psyche to make any
Yeah.
kind of prediction.
Right.
But if I were Yuki, and this is purely just if I were in Yuki's shoes, I would be looking. I would be saying, okay, hey, things don't work out with Antonelli, Mercedes, I'm available.
No
If
doubt. Yeah.
or any of those situations, if I was Yuki, I would be telling my management team, I'd be like, start putting out feelers, start seeing what kind of interest that I have. And I
Absolutely.
guarantee you that with what Yuki has done in the last two seasons, I would say that there's quite a few teams that would be quite happy to get, Yuki in their car.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. The one thing to think about is he did such a fantastic job, and he has over the last few seasons, which we've documented through a few podcasts. We've talked about him and his performance. So, if I was in his shoes, most definitely I would be on the phone with my management saying, "Hey, look, not saying that I'm looking, but I'm looking." One of those kind of put your feelers out. If somebody else doesn't work out, I'm here, right? And in
Yep.
the meantime, train, 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 get better. Because if Liam does not make it all the way through, there's nobody else. They have to come after you, So
Yep.
keep your head down, get fast, make little mistakes as you can, get better at your, personality wise, get out there in front of the media. All that stuff is really going to help transform you into no matter where you go. So even if you stay at Red Bull or if you go somewhere else, that skill set transfers no matter where you go. So instead of going, say for instance, going to one of the lower end teams, instead of that, you would have your opportunity if you do your training and you put your head down and you get that much better. It's just a matter of time until somebody else, one of the top teams come after you. So I
Yeah.
definitely think that that's the way that, at least if I was in his shoes, that's the way I would play it.
Yep. Absolutely. So we are in agreement there as well.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it, man.
All right, moving on. Okay, so late last week, Cadillac, in preparation for their joining of the grid in 2026 as a Formula One constructor, put out on social media saying, who do you think we should hire as drivers? And so Corey and I, we discussed this a little bit at dinner last Friday, but I thought it would be kind of fun to take and recreate that and maybe expound upon a little bit about what we talked about during that conversation. So, Corey, first off, what are your initial thoughts on who Cadillac should take and bring into the fold for the 2026 season?
Yeah, we're talking about this, and my knee jerk reaction was Carlos Sainz. I think that I think it's a travesty, and I'm not trying to talk poorly of Williams by any stretch, but I mean, you have a diamond there, and you have it inside of this ring that you just got out of the Cracker Jack box. Makes no sense, you know. So I think that would be a perfect move for him. Um, but failing that, I mean, Checo would be a great number one, a seasoned veteran, and then you pull somebody up from F2 or F3. That would be a fantastic move, I think.
Yeah, those would all be solid choices. Myself, I think that, they really should go with someone who is a very solid development driver.
Mhm.
They need to go with someone who, is a very, is a known quantity for Formula One as one of the drivers. Because I think the Cadillac's in kind of a unique position that they're really going to need to have one really solid,
Yeah.
experienced driver. And my thinking is I think that they should go with Valtteri Bottas, who is sitting on the sidelines right now. I think that if they were to bring him in now and let him start working with the development teams as they're developing the car for 2026, bring him on. He has that experience, he has that know-how that I think that he would be a really, really good choice. So I think that would be, a good choice for the experienced driver. And then on the flip side of the coin, I think that Cadillac is pretty much already, I don't want to say 100%, but because I don't have any, working knowledge of the insides of Cadillac at the moment, but I think the pressure is going to be on for them to have an American driver in the second seat. And but I don't think Sargent, is going to be, even in the mix. I
No,
think that
not at all.
they're going to be looking elsewhere outside of Formula One, or even, drivers who have driven in Formula One. And the person that I really think is the one who is going to make it as the Cadillac driver. I've just I don't want to say I'm going to make a bet on this
Yeah.
or make a prediction, but I really think that if Cadillac was smart, they would take Colton Herta from
That's
Formula
what you're
One,
saying.
I'm
Yep.
sorry, from IndyCar.
Yeah.
He finished second in the championship last year. He really, when IndyCar introduced their hybrid system mid-season, he really seemed to take to and have an understanding of the power unit that IndyCar switched to mid-season that a lot of the other drivers didn't, in the fact that he was able to take and turn it into two very spectacular wins. And like I said, he ended up finishing second on the season, in the IndyCar championship. He's done a number of tests in Formula One. I think that he is like, if you're going to pick any one American to jump into Formula One with Cadillac, I think Colton Hurt is really the only one that you can really think, is
Yeah.
really going to be the best way to go. I think that his upside and his ceiling is like super high, that given if Cadillac can nail, I don't, think Cadillac would be, really all that competitive the first two seasons. But once they start producing their own power units, and if they can nail the packaging just right, and if Herta, can, make that transition, I think that Cadillac has a really great opportunity to grab a really great driver for their future. While if they were to grab someone like a Botas, or I really, because Signs is, signed a long-term deal
Yeah.
with
Right.
Williams, I don't know that Cadillac would be able to take pry him away from Williams.
It's
Again, we've
early,
talked about
right?
there's no such thing as an ironclad contract in Formula One, but I have a sneaking suspicion that, for anyone other than Ferrari, trying to get signs out of that Williams seat would be a
Yeah,
monumental task.
sure.
But at the same time, you have a driver who has also been very much at the sharp end of the grid in Valtteri Bottas, who is right now available, who could very much start, literally right away in helping to develop the car, because Herta would have his own obligations in IndyCar, so he wouldn't be able to take and spend as much time developing the car for next year. But Bottas would be an outstanding choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wish to withdraw my previous statement and go with Botas as well.
Excellent. All right. So as Corey mentioned at the top of the show, we are recording on Tuesday, January 21st. So yesterday, Monday, January the 20th, was Lewis Hamilton's first day at school. I mean, first day at Ferrari. He came into Ferrari for his first official day of work, where he met with senior management, including team principal Freddie Vasseur, as well as the CEO of Ferrari. He got to meet a number of the engineers and the crew, mechanics for the racing team, and got to spend, a number of hours, getting to meet, all the factory workers and stuff. If you haven't seen the pictures, he looks just absolutely posh.
Yeah.
When he showed up to Ferrari. I mean, and I saw on social media, I forgot who posted it, but they actually showed, a side by side picture of Lewis, of him being knighted, and a picture of him standing in front
Oh, I didn't
of
see
a.
that one.
Yes. Oh, it was outstanding. They had showed a picture of him being knighted by Sir Charles, and then they also had a side by side picture of him dressed in the super cool overcoat and the super sharp suit, standing next to the Ferrari, where he went from Sir Hamilton to Don Hamilton. Because he did. He was dressed all in black. He looked just like, I mean, he looked like a super sharply dressed mafia boss. And I think the parallels was just outstanding.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw somebody on X today was saying, that picture they had of him in front with the coat and everything like that, standing, in front of the doorway. Kind of cool. I didn't realize this until I saw this comment, but there's 7 windows, 7 championships.
Mm-hmm.
He has a door to go through to get his 8th.
Yep.
I just thought it was kind of poetic. I thought that was kind of cool.
Wow. I had
Right?
not seen that. And
Yeah.
that is freaking cool.
Right? I don't know if
That
it
is
was really planned, but
no,
they are
but
geniuses if they did.
yes, absolutely. Whether it was a happy coincidence
Yeah.
or, or if it was done on purpose, either way, it's pure genius, and actually kind of gives me a little bit of shivers down my spine thinking about
Right.
that.
Yeah, yeah, right.
That is fantastic. So,
Yeah, right on.
so we also got the news today that Sky Sports will actually get to televise Hamilton's first outing in the Ferrari later this week, which will happen either tomorrow, Wednesday, or possibly Thursday, depending upon the weather. So, thankfully, with Formula One's testing of previous machinery rule, meaning that Lewis can take and jump into a 2-year-old Ferrari and drive it without any testing regulations, beyond just the normal regulations. So he will actually get a taste of, and start learning, Ferrari systems, start learning the way that the mechanics work and everything. And the fact that Sky Sports is going to get to actually televise this is a huge thing. So Hamilton will take and actually get to drive the car around the Fiorina test track, where Ferrari has done, just absolutely tons of testing in the past. And that, they still use it basically on a daily basis for testing their road cars. So for him to actually get to climb into a Ferrari, we're going to get to see him in, the scarlet jumpsuit for the first time. We're going to get to see him. Probably, I can almost guarantee he's going to unveil some kind of new helmet design that he'll carry forward into the season for Ferrari. And I just, the more I think about it, the more excited I get. And the more chill, the more stunning it is the way that, the fact that Ferrari has, we've talked about what a class act Freddie
Hmm.
is, as the team principal and everything. And what a wonderful job Ferrari has done, both in, saying goodbye to Carlos, and now what we've seen with them doing, with them bringing in, Lewis. It's just nothing short of amazing what they've done. And I'm just at times, I'm just awestruck at what a difference the Ferrari is now compared to even as little as 5 years ago.
Right. Oh, it's amazing. It's totally transformed. You can't even recognize the same team, you know?
Yes. And I really think that, and again, that all comes down to the leadership that
Mhm.
Ferrari has put into place over there at Maranello. And it is just nothing short of awe-inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been fantastic. It's been fantastic just to watch. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
I cannot wait for the fireworks to start for the season.
Oh man,
I
me too.
Yeah, I cannot, it's just, I know that we're just, waiting, I think we're all waiting, kind of, holding our breath, waiting to see, Ferrari, take the wraps off the car in Bahrain. Last thing on the agenda for today is another rumor that was being floated around at the end of last week, but and we'll discuss this here in just a few minutes. I'm putting a little more stock into this rumor that it
Really?
may be happening only because of who the source was. Initially, we were seeing on social media, but then later it was published by none other than Motorsport Magazine, which is a very highly respected, you know, magazine that has been around for decades, that they for the most, they aspire to, the greatest the highest standards of journalistic, ethics and everything. And when they report it, you kind of have to sit back and take notice. So the whole rumor is that there is a very good possibility that Max Verstappen may be leaving Red Bull at the end of the 2025 season and joining Aston Martin in 2026. Your thoughts, Corey?
Oh, I think it's crazy, honestly. Well, the reason why, I saw yet again another rumor that basically Newey said, "Look, I can give you a car, but you have to have a driver that can drive that car. Your son is not that guy." So I don't know how true that is, but if that were true, we may not be seeing uh, Stroll out on the circuit here soon. Who knows? Like you said before, this wouldn't be for this year coming 2025. This would be for next year 2026 when Newey's design actually hits. So give him another year on the circuit. Have him race one more time, knowing that that's his last race or last season, and then bring the Max in. Max and Alonso. Oh wow, what a team, right?
Yes, it could go
Yeah,
very, very
I think
well,
that would work.
or we could see fireworks that makes, that would make, Hamilton and Rosberg look like, a bunch of sparklers at a wedding, type thing. It could go one of either way. But I think you're right, that I think that, if Max were going to make a move, now Max apparently is on a long-term contract. Nobody has any idea of how long, because it's never been fully disclosed. But most people speculate that it's somewhere, in the 28 season range of his contract. But again, like we've talked about 100 times before, there's no such thing as an ironclad contract in Formula One. And I guarantee you that, especially when he signed his extension a year or two ago, Max has all kinds of, escape clauses in there, very much like Lewis had when he signed his 2-year extension, and then less than 2 months later, announced that he was leaving and going to Ferrari. So and I really think that this might be a case of we might see the exact same thing. Whereas Lewis, right before the beginning of the season, dropped the bombshell that he was leaving Mercedes and going to Ferrari. We may see the exact same thing where right before preseason testing starts, Max will make the announcement saying, "Hey, I'm leaving Red Bull and going to Aston Martin next season," because I think that the timing is perfect that if he were going to make that move, because one, you're right, this will be Newey's the 2025 car will have Newey's fingerprints on it, but because it wasn't his car to begin with, you can't really consider it truly a Newey car. Whereas the 2026 car will be the first one that has Newey's fingerprints all over it. It'll be the first car at Aston Martin that is completely headed by Newey.
Right.
Plus, you have Honda, who Max has enjoyed tremendous amounts of success with, are moving from Red Bull at the end of the 2025 season to Aston Martin. So Max is already very familiar with all of the technical team and all of the leadership at Honda because of their time working with Red Bull.
Yep.
You have the relationship between Max and Newey. And like what we talked about at dinner last Friday, Max, has loyalties, but his loyalties are to Helmut Marko and to Adrian Newey. Not so much Christian Horner, I don't think. Now, that's somewhat speculation, but just reading news reports and things like that, that's kind of the feeling that I get, is that Max's loyalties reside much more with Newey.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And not only that, but on top of everything else, all of those other pieces that would be falling into place to take and get Max to make that jump. But Lawrence Stroll has shown that he does not have any problem with backing up the dump truck full of money and dumping it, in order to get the absolute best people. He wants to win. There's a lot of, guys who come into the sport, they'll buy a team, they'll say, I want to win, but they don't invest the kind of capital in, not just in drivers and people, but also in the infrastructure and giving those people the best tools possible. Lawrence Stroll has done that. And I don't doubt for a second that in order to get Max to come over, he is literally going to back the dump truck up. Motorsport even speculated that it could be worth as much as $1 billion.
That's what
because they would not only give him an enormous paycheck to come drive for them, but they would probably also do much like they did with Adrian Newey, in the fact that Adrian Newey actually owns part of the team. They actually gave him shares in the team so that he's a part owner, that I can almost guarantee you they would do the exact same thing with Max, where he would actually own a part of the team to come drive for them. So I think with all these stars aligning, and then plus, like I said, because Motorsport reported on it, I put a lot more stock into these rumors and everything, because they're not going to print something that doesn't have really solid, reliable sources. And the fact that they printed it means that they've got those, which means that there is a very good possibility we could see this happening. And so, like I said, I just gut feeling, I have nothing to base this on, but I really do think that that's what we're going to see, is we're going to see another Lewis Hamilton type announcement before the first wheel turns in Bahrain in a couple weeks.
Oh man, can you imagine the firestorm?
Oh, but not only that, but can you imagine that if Max leaves Red Bull, the team that he has won the last 4 drivers' championships with, if he leaves that team, can you imagine what kind of chaos that's going to do to the driver market?
Oh yeah, right.
Especially if I'm correct in the fact that I don't think Liam Lawson is going to
make it.
It won't be there for the entire season. Can you imagine the chaos that's going to happen at Red Bull, and then the repercussions that that's going to have all the way down the grid?
I know.
So yes, I'm like super excited about this, and I cannot wait to see what comes of it, if anything. I mean, it could all fall apart at the last minute, but right now with the rumors and being as solid a rumor as you can get, and I'm using the air quotes here, I'm super excited to see what happens.
Yeah, it's gonna be amazing. If that happens, it's just because, like you said, it opens up so much, especially if you have, if Lawson does drop, you have a whole new team at Red Bull. Nobody is showing the other person how, the ropes. There's nothing like that. There's no tribal knowledge. If it happens, oh wow,
Yeah,
it's gonna be fireworks.
it is. It's going
I
to be
think it's
super fun to watch.
yeah, exactly. As pundits, it'll be very, very fun. And fans,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep. And not only that, but it's just, again, like I said, before, Lawrence Stroll is really, he wants to win. And by being able to pull off the coup of all coups in
Mhm.
getting the current Formula One drivers champion, the only other driver, that could take and generate that kind of heat for Lawrence would be if he had been able to take lure Lewis away
Yeah,
to Aston Martin.
yeah.
This would be just as highly touted a driver getting to come to your team that's going to prove to the grid, I want to win now.
Everybody has said you have a limited factor at Aston because you basically have one spot, and because the other one is to his son. So
Yes.
if his son drops out, now that can actually become a good team.
Yes.
Whereas
Without a
before, you
doubt.
really don't have that.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting because
It's
where does his loyalty really lie? I mean,
yeah.
Stroll's a good, I'd say mid-tier driver, maybe, if I'm being
Mm-hmm.
honest. But there's just no way. If you want to be a top tier team, he's not going to carry your team. He's just not.
No,
He's not
not
even
at
going to be
all.
a good support team.
Yeah.
It's time. If you really want to win, you have to have both slots open.
Yep. Absolutely. You absolutely have to have that ability to have the two best possible drivers that are going to make your team succeed. And as much as, I don't like to bag on him or anything because, and again, we've talked about this a number of times here on the show, about how Stroll, as he was coming up through the ranks to Formula One, I mean, he was regularly beating, much, names like Leclerc and like that coming up through the ranks, he was no slouch as a racing driver. He earned his way into, well, he got to Formula One with daddy's money, but he still had to earn his super license just like everybody else. Daddy couldn't buy that for him, and he did, on that, ability by having both, talent and being able to regularly outrun, very, very highly touted drivers, as well as having that money that brought together the fusion. But the thing is, though, is that now that the grid is so tight,
Mm-hmm.
it's not enough anymore. And unfortunately, as much as, I know Stroll would like to see his son succeed, he's also a businessman. He wants to win. And eventually he's going to come to a point where he's just going to say, son, I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. You're gone. And
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah. Again, it it goes to show how much you really want to win. If you ask your son to leave, then we know for sure that's
You're going to know absolutely how ruthless Lawrence Stroll really is.
right, right. I wouldn't say ruthless, because well, I guess it all depends. I mean, if he just gives him the axe, then that's ruthless. It's just like sit down,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's a key part in my company. You can go do this. You
Yep.
can see X or whatever. That would be a more gracious thing. Just
Well,
can't right. Yeah, that would be ruthless.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see him, being that ruthless. I would see him
Yeah,
either he would have some kind of role within uh the team, at a management level, Or I think more likely we would probably see, because Aston Martin is also going to be joining the World Endurance Championship as a constructor for in the hypercar division, that I really could see him being moved over to the sports car side and driving the Aston Martin Valkyrie, in the World Endurance Championship, driving it, and going sports car racing. That's kind of what I see would be happening, is I would see him becoming a driver over on the sports car side for Aston Martin.
Yeah, I could definitely see that too. I mean,
Yeah.
and that keeps him in racing, and that keeps him happy, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'll say this: F1 at Aston Martin is not for him.
No.
It just isn't.
Agreed.
Unless you want to be a mid-tier team. Then if you're a mid-tier team, you don't bring over somebody like Adrian Newey. You leave it as it was, and that's not where he's directing the company. So maybe the writing's on the wall. Maybe he sees it, So we'll see next year.
Yeah, you got to kind of think that he does see the writing on the wall. He probably knows that it's coming.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
All right. Anything else for this week?
I think I'm good so far, man. Yeah.
Okay. All right, then. So it'll be really, like I said, we'll see Lewis hopefully in the Ferrari for the first time, either tomorrow or Thursday. So we'll make sure that we take and touch on that next week.
Awesome. Sounds good.
So that's all the time we have for today, my friends. Tune in next week when Corey and I will have an all-new biography. We'll talk about the latest happenings in the world of Formula One, and we'll have our first preview of preseason testing and the team's launch dates. Okay. So until next time, he's Corey, I'm Scott. We're the pundits of F1 Brake Check. Let's go!
Thank you for listening to F1 Brake Check. If you have enjoyed what you heard, don't miss a single episode by hitting that subscribe button in your favorite podcatcher, or you can watch the video version on YouTube. Help us grow by sharing us with your friends and fellow F1 fans. You can contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok and X at F1 Brake Check. Our website is f1brakecheck.com, where you will find links to all our content. We value your passion and your feedback, so please take a moment to review our podcast. Your reviews help us grow and improve, and it means the world to us. Share your thoughts, rate us, and let us know how we can make the show experience even better. F1 Brake Check is a production of Brake Check Media. For your hosts Scott Vick and Corey Broom, until next time, keep yourself inside track limits, and try not to pitch it in the kitty litter.